Moving on to key stakeholders. So everybody has stakeholders within the organization. The key thing at the very start of your migration and making sure your migration is a success is really considering how you bring your organization together. So who are your key stakeholders? You need to identify those that are impacted by your migration. So this isn't just a business level. This isn't just looking at who makes the final decision or who signs off the budget. This is about looking at the entire organization and then identifying those stakeholders who are impacted by your migration, not just the people that sign it off, but who are impacted, who then you need to bring on that journey from an end user perspective or operations perspective. You need to bring those involved and really identify who are your key stakeholders. The what makes them a key stakeholder? How are they impacted? In what ways are they impacted? And what's important to them when assessing their needs and their requirements? Because that's a far easier way of bringing them into that business case. If you can say, you've got these series of challenges, this is how our cloud migration is going to help you with those particular challenges. And then the why are they a key stakeholder for your project, and how they impact it in terms of priority? So a basic example is the senior leadership team. If they're impacted in the sense that they can basically press a button and say yes or no to your entire migration project, then obviously it's really important that their needs, their requirements, and them being onboarded with the journey is really important to your cloud migration project. And then finally, the how. How can we bring them on side? How can we promote that migration project? And how can we give them the information that they need to be able to feel part of the project and make sure that that migration happens, and the objectives, the budgets, all the facets of the cloud migration that you've identified happen and are available for you to use. So in terms of who are your key stakeholders, there's just a few examples here. So senior leadership, your individual technical delivery teams, your end users. Other options could be, as I've already said, your project teams, finance, operations. But the key thing here in terms of who is mapping out again how they impact your migration strategy. Who's got, so taking senior leadership, for example, who's got project sign off. They obviously, their budget allocation, they've got an impact in terms of what the wider business strategy is, and they're going to be really key on what the objectives of the migration are and making sure that those objectives are met. In terms of the individual technical teams, they're going to want to be, you're going to need them to be on board with the vision, because they're likely to be playing a key part in the actual rollout and either doing it themselves or liaising with partners who will be doing that work. They need to understand the value so that they're motivated to be part of that project. They need to have the capacity, and they need the experience and the capabilities, or even just a consideration of their experience and capabilities to make sure they're supported in the right way to make sure your cloud migration is a success. And then finally, your end users, how are they impacted? Do they have specific needs, and do they understand the value of the project? There's nothing worse than having a series of end users who are not engaged in a particular project, who cause issues, who don't want to change their way of working because they've got used to whatever they need to be used to in terms of their current way of working. These are all the types of things that you need to think about with regards to your key stakeholders and actioning those. So a key action we've got there is just to create a stakeholder map out all of the stakeholders in the organization that can be impacted by the project, prioritize them in terms of that project becoming a reality, and then making sure you map their requirements and needs to that. And then moving on to the what and why, this is sort of an extension of that previous slide. What makes somebody a key stakeholder, and why is that important to your migration? And this is the fundamental part to the success of your migration, either getting off the ground or meeting the objectives that you put as part of the business case. So basic example here in terms of senior leadership, the what is that they are a company strategy owner, they've got their budget influencer, they can approve the project, and they can also allocate resources to you. The key why in terms of why they're stakeholders, that they have ultimate sign-off. They can basically derive what the budget amount might be, and they can also have an impact on the company-wide endorsement of the cloud migration. And then how can you bring them aboard? Well, presenting a business case to them in terms of the benefits of that particular migration. Return on investment evaluation is obviously key in terms of what happens if we stay as we are in comparison to what we're presenting, and also the risk analysis, putting a risk analysis together to say these are the risks, we understand the risk, and we've mitigated these risks in these ways. So it's that 3-step process to make sure your stakeholders feel engaged and make sure that they want to make sure they want to incorporate their objectives into your project, but also they want your project to succeed as much as you want your project to succeed. And then finally, how can you win over stakeholders? So again, this is an extension of that how section previously. Obviously, these elements depend on the size of your organization, but starting off with focus groups for end users, what would be a thing that's ideal in their world in terms of how can they improve their way of working, what frustrates them at the moment. Requirements evaluation, so mapping out all of your requirements from a top level business perspective as well as your technical perspective. Risk and impact reporting, so making sure the business feels confident in what we're doing from a project perspective. Identify champions is a really good way of adoption and creating that adoption feeling. So identify people within particular teams that are part of a project team, for example, that are then incorporated into meetings and preliminary meetings to get this project off the ground. Providing training plans, or even just saying this is how this would look from a rollout perspective, and this is our dedication to you as a team to make sure this is a success for you and doesn't impact you away from your day-to-day business workings from a technical perspective. And then stakeholder packs, just creating packs of information for the various stakeholders you've identified that meets their objectives, is a clearly defined scenario of processes and ways of obtaining those objectives, and really just shows that the entire organization is on the same page with regards to your Azure migration, and that will fundamentally give it the best chance of success.